This is going to be a 6-month update on my $1,500 Lexus LS430 2002 model. So when I got this car, it had, if I want to try to get this exactly right, 241,110 miles, give or take. And right now it is at 247,334. So in 6 months I've put a little over 6,000 miles on it. When I bought it, I paid $1,500 for it, and it had a few issues. It was misfiring really bad, and that was due to the VVT solenoid on the right side, and then the left one went out shortly after that. I got those for about 50 bucks and replaced those, and then it ran smooth as silk after that. That was also that one of them also threw a 0-point calibration error, and I have my X Pros, which I use to recalibrate the stability control. Had to get it on level ground and reset it. I can't remember if I made a video of that or not. I may have or may not have, I don't know. So that took care of that. That got rid of the stability control error. Oh, it also had a cable leading from the wheel speed sensor on the right to the car's computer. The wiring harness was bad on that. Now the Lexus dealer had actually quoted that they replaced that entire hub assembly with this integrated sensor to the previous owner, and they opted not to do that, and then I fixed it for just the cost of the wiring harness, which is like about 100 bucks. I got an original Lexus one. Yeah, and then since then it's been perfectly fine. The biggest problem I had with the car is probably roughly about 244 on the mileage. I took it on a road trip and I noticed it was smoking a lot under the hood. It turns out that the torque converter seal had gone bad, and I ended up losing about a quart or so of transmission fluid on that one trip. Fortunately no more. It was still visible on the dipstick, so I added that, and then that wasn't something I could do myself, so I decided it was worth it to have a shop go ahead and replace that seal. That set me back about 600 bucks. That was done at 244. It's been perfect ever since then. And then the other thing is it had an oil leak, and I thought it was because the valve cover bolts were loose. So I took the time to tighten those all down, and it seemed like the oil leak continued after that. So I figured, well, maybe it was the oil level sensor or the O-ring for the dipstick tube or something like that. But then eventually it just stopped. It stopped leaking. Or stopped smoking, I should say. Maybe the residual oil was gathered up in the engine and it finally went away. Like for the last 2 months, it hasn't really smelled like it was burning. So it seems, so that's a note. If you have one of these that's leaking oil from the valve covers, go ahead and tighten all the bolts down, and then give it a couple months of driving for the residual oil to clear up. I've seen on the forums that other people have tightened their bolts for their valve cover gaskets, and that has solved the issue. So that did work for me. It looks like we have something going on here. I have the right of way here. So yeah, other than that, right now you can see it's error free. There is a periodic check engine light that comes on, and that it shows as a catalytic converter. But that's not the problem. What the problem is there is a I'm gonna floor it here. runs really well, and I have more to say about that too. The there's a gasket or flange or something that has a small leak. You can actually see it like when you first start it cold in cold weather and it's making the steam, you can see it come out of there. It's like right under the passenger seat approximately, and it's such a small leak that it is kind of hard to tell. And I actually had the same shop that did the transmission seal tell me that the exhaust is not leaking. But anyway, that triggers a periodic false reading to the oxygen sensors, which tells it that it needs a catalytic converter. I suspect that actually happened on the left side of the car because there is a history. They paid like $1,600 to have the catalytic converter fixed in this car before. Cars like this are really great to buy, especially if they have a long-term ownership. The family that I bought this from had it for ever since like 05, I want to say. And you know, people who buy luxury cars, new or newish, tend to take very good care of them. Now, they did kind of let it lapse a little bit toward the end there with the oil leaks and stuff. However, I don't know exactly the last timing belt. I know for sure it was done at 98. I suspect it was done around 200. But if not, these timing belts, as long as everything was replaced, are known to last at least 180 or more. So I'm not worried about that. And it's had things like fuel injection cleaning and coolant changes and brake fluid changes and stuff like that. You can tell the upper and lower control arms and the front suspension were replaced not that long ago. The handling of the car is all there. There's no clunks. It feels very stable and secure. And yeah, cars like this are a tremendous value. I mean, I'd say all in, I put a new set of snow tires on it for the winter. All in, I was maybe $3,000. You know, it's got a little bit of rust, a little bit of hail damage, but you can see in my other video that I did of this car when I first got it. It's generally a very nice car if you're not really particular to little details like that, and I'm not. I mean, some faded paint, whatever. I basically see that I've got a great running car that, you know, I've driven it on 400, 500 mile road trips without issues. I would take it anywhere. It doesn't use any oil. Even when it was leaking, which is weird, it didn't use any oil. Well, at least after I tightened it, which I guess is kind of a clue that that it wasn't leaking anymore, now that I think about it. But, you know, I would recommend one of these to anybody. Generally, they go for a lot more money than I've got in this one. But you know, I like getting cheap cars. I don't know if this is necessarily the cheapest one, but it could be for as good as it was and as little work. I mean, I drove it home just fine, about an hour, hour and a half, something like that when I got it. And you know, it's very enjoyable to drive. I mean, the driving sensations and feel. I just test drove not too long ago the new version of this car, the LS500, and it basically drives the same. And you know, you can see, I don't know if you can see the speedometer, but this thing, it's downright fast. I mean, it's got like 295 horsepower, and it's all there. You know, the brakes were good. They were done not too long before I got the car. Nice smooth braking. At least half of the brakes are left. My other set of tires, I still have the snow tires on it. Haven't really gone much of anywhere with this whole coronavirus thing. But just an overall enjoyable car to drive with it. It's got a few quirks. Yeah, and so if anybody has any specific questions, please go ahead and drop a comment. For the rest of the video, just like I did with my Nissan video that I made, I am just going to drive so you can hear the car and ride along. And as in the Nissan video, this will have given you a pretty good idea about what this car is all about. And that's that.